The other thing that we try to do is bring a regional focus into the planning area, because we are finding that you can't deal with change and find a way to kind of manage it if you look at only one part of a regional area. And so integrating, oh, thank you. Is to promote that. Empowering rural communities to participate and become involved in their decision-making process. Extremely important. You certainly know that down here. Making room for new agricultural production and processing technology. What's the impact of renewable energy, food supply, local foods. What is the connection between food and quality of life, or a sense of an area? What makes food here in Minnesota different than food down in Alabama, for instance? And then finally, filling an educational gap, because we can provide information on rural land issues by getting out and just talking and trying to make those connections that we're talking up here, particularly relationships between large and small towns. Now, I was just going to run through kind of 6 projects that we're involved with, or have been involved with over the last few years. Dealing with dairy, the city of Roseau, which after they had their flood in 2002, working with the community of Morris and the school and the county up in that area. Livonia Township is a township just outside of the metropolitan area. It's one that is not part of the Metropolitan Council. It doesn't have all of the planning help, but it's one of the townships all around the metropolitan area where they're dealing with all of the sprawl issues and trying to maintain a quality of life while they deal with all the change. And a project that we've been working on with the Minnesota Rural Partners called Minnesota 2058. We're really trying to nurture a look at the entire state and project 50 years into the future from a visioning standpoint. Just try to identify those things that you could do today in terms of either preserving or the kind of decisions you could make that might have a very positive impact on what the rural areas of Minnesota are over the next 50 years. And then a very interesting one, it's a Umore Park. It's an urban-rural edge issue. It's a new community that the university is planning in Rosemont. And I'll talk about these just a little bit one at a time here. But the Minnesota Dairy Initiative is one of our early projects, but the Minnesota dairy industry was having real problems because of how they dealt with their industry and how they, particularly in terms of expanding dairies, and how they could do it in such a way that it had a very positive impact on the environment. And so in a way it was kind of an effort to try to preserve and enhance and protect both the dairy industry producers as well as the environment itself. And it became very quickly apparent that the issues were quite different around the state. I mean, the whole southeast area, you have all these karst areas and everything else, which has an enormous impact on environmental kind of things compared to northwest Minnesota, up in the Crookston area, which is flatter than a pancake, and so it varies a great deal. But we weren't able to get the funding from the LCMR to do the entire state, but we did focus, as one example, was Stearns County in central Minnesota, and again using the computer to identify the environmental issues that whether it had to do with habitat or water, drainage systems, wells, and in fact, if you look closely at this one, you find that in Stearns County, there's not a lot of places where there aren't wells that people use to draw water from. And so you really have to, the dairy farmers in particular, they needed to understand the nature of the land within which they were operating, if indeed they were going to expand and do it in such a way that it didn't have any kind of a negative impact on the farming. And so we got down to the farm scale, and this Jennison farm was a small family farm. They had 60 cows. They had 3 daughters that were going to college. They were thinking that the girls wanted to move back and become part of the family dairy industry. So we worked with them to go from 60 cows to 250 cows, and to do it in a variety of ways, including a robotic milker, and how they could stage it over time, depending on the decisions that they made as a family. This was the farm. There was a non-farm residence near it, and we worked with the Biosystems and Ag Engineering Department at the university, who had an odor offset program, so that we could determine just how the land should be developed and how odor and so forth in terms of manure handling systems to protect the integrity of that place, as well as all of the other things in terms of riparian and maintaining ground cover and runoff from the land. And so it was from both the county scale as well as the farm scale. Now, Roseau was a different kind of thing. They called us in because the flood, the Roseau River goes right through the town, and when it flooded, it just spread out in both directions and impacted a lot of houses, the whole downtown area. And as maybe happened down in this area, under those types of circumstances, the state and the federal government do have a lot of programs to help people recover from a flood area. And the people in Roseau were feeling really overwhelmed by this process, that they were losing control of their own future. And so we came in along with the Minnesota design team and organized a community workshop up there over a weekend. And out of that workshop came some ideas of a new city center, because they had to build a new city hall, a new library, a new community center, and plus other things, and the idea of creating this park as a unifying element between both sides of the river, rather than the opposite side. And so that with the design team, then we went on and continued to work with a civic group to massage that. And indeed, they have moved forward out. They're building a new library. I think it's actually built, new city hall, new community center. And but an idea, for instance, of the pedestrian bridge reminded me of some in Holland. But people could walk across from the park, but when the flood wasn't there. But if it flooded, then they could run up, right? So they wouldn't block the water flow and that type of thing. So I don't think that'll happen, but it was ideas that emerged out of that whole effort. And I'm not showing you all the things. But here, working with the city of Morris, they had a HUD grant, an elementary school right in the downtown area, a 17-acre site. Stevens County is struggling to maintain population up there. The city of Morris is struggling to maintain population. Without the university, they wouldn't be at 5,000 people. Then there's a cutoff. If you got 5,000 people or more, you get more state funds and support than if you're less than that. So the county, the city, and the university were all kind of integrated in. And the university had decided that their focus is really on renewable energy and international education. And so we built on that and went through a series of community workshops on this particular site with this historic building, and finally ending up with a little village of housing that would be all sustainable, tied in with some of the energy planning at the university, an expansion of the cemetery with the idea of asking the question, what is a 21st century cemetery? Is there a cultural kind of basis for it? And a city park, and then the rehabilitation of the historic school. And that project is moving forward, and However, the city and the county decided not to go ahead with the school project, so that is still up in the air whether that will be even preserved. But the reason I mention that is because it gives you an idea of kind of the different ways and different kinds of issues involved with rural areas. Now we're talking about a township, and Livonia Township, Wyoming Township are two areas, and currently we're just finishing up with Isani County a project, and but again, it's just on the outside of the metropolitan area, and so it is this struggle that's going on with people who want to preserve a rural lifestyle, but are being inundated by all of the people who want to move out from the metropolitan area, have all the advantages of labor, commuting, who knows with gas and all that, whether that's going to continue.